We spoke yesterday, didn't we, Richard, where we thought there's a lot of reporting, very confident reporting. You were slightly more sceptical, actually, that this border was definitely going to open to a certain extent. It didn't. Why
No.
is that? What's the thing stopping the border being opened?
Okay, so there are two issues with the border. There's the very specific issue of what's going on at this moment in time, which is a negotiation to have a limited opening of the border in either direction to let foreign nationals who are in Gaza and want to leave out. We, of course, know of many foreign nationals, including the Scottish First Minister's parents-in-law, who are on a visit to Gaza, and people want to go home, understandably, and so there's pressure to let them out and to let humanitarian aid in, and it seems to become an article of faith, perhaps understandably, that there should be a ceasefire for that to happen. That has yet to be negotiated. The Americans are trying to negotiate it. The Egyptians want that. The Israelis are skeptical of the ceasefire demand, and also skeptical of what will happen to humanitarian aid. They have made clear that aid for them is a supply to the enemy, so they have tried to blockade. It's not quite clear the exact reason why this deal isn't happening. I say the Americans want it to happen. The wider issue is, why not just have that border open and allow the 2 million civilian residents of Gaza into Egypt? I mean, that's what actually Israel wants. Israel wants all those civilians to go to Egypt. They can sit out the war, and then Israel can just focus on the militants who are left behind. Egypt will not allow that. It believes and fears that those Palestinians would then become a permanent refugee population in Egypt, as Palestinians have become in Syria and Jordan and Lebanon, and they are not prepared to allow that to happen. They put it, and Palestinians put it as that is effectively a form of ethnic cleansing that can't be allowed.
You also make a great point in the paper today, which I didn't realise, that the president of Egypt might not actually be that closely politically allied to Hamas itself.
No, so Hamas is an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's an Islamist organization. There are Palestinian factions, some equally militant, at least in the past. They're rather defunct now, but some Palestinian factions in the past who've been just as militant as Hamas, who've been secular, even Marxist. But Hamas is the main, probably now, Palestinian faction. It certainly controls Gaza, and it's an offshoot of the Muslim Brotherhood. It's Islamist. Sisi came to power by getting rid of the Muslim Brotherhood. He has a fanatical hatred of the modern form of Islamist politics, and so he deals with Hamas in a way that he doesn't deal with the Muslim Brotherhood itself, for example, but that's because he has to, and he certainly doesn't want a armed militant group that is allied to his former enemy to allow itself to establish itself in Egypt.
Which would suggest that he's never going to open the border up completely, if not for that reason, alongside many others. Is there a practical problem here as well, Richard? It strikes me that if you say foreign nationals can come through this border, and there is up to 2 million, maybe 1 million, 500,000, 600,000 desperate Gazans who are terrified of being killed, it's very hard to partially open a border to a trickle when there's a potential flood of humanitarian need behind it.
I mean, it's grotesque, but the world is grotesque. I mean, what can one say? That's not only true of that border crossing there. There are trickles at huge numbers of borders around the world. That has been the case on that border crossing ever since Hamas took over Gaza in 2005. It's been very hard for residents of Gaza to leave. It's an incredibly bureaucratic process to go and visit relatives, to go and study abroad. And both Israel and Egypt say that is unfortunately the nature of things. Israel, for example, says, well, we let 18,000 people from Gaza through on work permits recently as a special concession to Gaza to allow Gazans to come to Israel to work. They did that earlier this year, and they say, look how that played out.
Yeah.
our own border, let's face it, in Britain is, a highly divisive, topic of conversation. This is just a very intense and murderous example of the same thing.
A couple more things, Richard, before you go. Biden coming tomorrow. And the cynic in me says Biden wouldn't be going unless there was a sort of some form of diplomatic win for him already semi-negotiated. Is that too cynical? Is it that he will arrive tomorrow and the border will be open in some form or another with him there?
Yes, I think he is. I've been thinking about this overnight since it first came about that there was first suggested that he was going to visit. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons being suggested. One is he just wants to hold off the Israeli ground offensive for a while. One is domestic political. So, he's got a lot of praise from Israelis. And of course, one of the arguments Trump uses against him is he's soft on his international politics. And Trump has always posed as the greatest friend of the Jewish community in America. So maybe there's a political win of standing by Netanyahu at Israel's time of need. Maybe there's a deal. I don't think that this is something that Biden would fly to Israel for. So I'm afraid I lean more to the political explanation. Whether there is a deal, I don't know. I wouldn't fly to meet Benjamin Netanyahu. Because the deal was almost there and needed to be pushed over the table. I think it would have to be announced and done if that was your aim.